Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another question the narrative video, and today's topic was actually chosen by people in my audience. I had put a poll on my YouTube community page asking what the next topic should be, and I gave two choices and then a third choice of other, and this was the winner. And today's topic is historical and geological anomalies and outright absurdities. So I'm going to be sharing some really interesting stuff with you today. Some of it is just outright strange. Other things are mysteries. We're not sure what they were or how they were caused. And some of them, we have a pretty good idea of what they are, but we have been lied to about what they really are. So let's start with one of those instances. So what you're looking at here is the DuckDuckGo search page for the bodies of the Pompeii citizens. Now, I grew up hearing about Pompeii all the time in school, on documentaries. My dad was a huge Discovery and History Channel person, so I was always watching that stuff with him. And every time the story of Pompeii would come up, if you don't know what it is, it's just, well, not just, it was pretty significant, but it happened supposedly in 79 AD. Always take these years with a grain of salt. In 79 AD, when Mount Vesuvius erupted and just wiped out an entire city. And so what I remember from being a child was just the images we were always shown of these bodies that were covered in hardened ash. They were preserved through time with this ash, and it was haunting, because they looked like actual real life people. And then the other day, I discovered something after learning my whole life that these were bodies that were actually covered in the hardened ash from the volcano. That's not what they are at all. They are actually made of plaster. So, the plaster citizens of Pompeii. So, I have found articles going back to 2015. I'm sure that there are articles before that about this. I'm not sure when this one. Oh, this one's 2006. So here I am already on an earlier one. So if it has been known for so long that these citizens are not covered in hardened ash, but they are actually plaster. The impression was always that the volcano ash rained down on these people and it encased them, and then it hardened. And so they always gave the impression that they were showing you the bodies covered with this ash. But what this actually is they poured plaster into a hollow where the remains once were. Then they decayed over time and are, just whatever is left now. So they poured it into a hollow and was able to make these casts from the ash. So while what you're looking at is still probably very similar to what was underneath there, it just goes to show how, there are a lot of nuances that, I don't know, the people who are presenting history to us don't think are really important for us to know the details. But I'm one of those people that the details are really important. And if you're going to gain my trust about anything, you're going to tell me the truth. And so people should be told from the truth. These are not the actual bodies. These are just plaster casts. So anyway, we'll just read a little bit about this. Those that did not flee the city of Pompeii in August of 79 AD were doomed, buried for 1,700 years under 30 feet of mud and ash, and reduced by the centuries to skeletons. They remained entombed until excavations in the early 1800s. I will also say at this point that there is much speculation that Pompeii did not happen in 79 AD and that it happened much, much more recently. And you know what? It wouldn't surprise me. As excavators continued, oh, by the way, you're hearing my coffee pot in the background. And every time that you hear my coffee pot in the background of one of my videos, you know that it's probably going to be a longer one. Because if I think that I'm going to need coffee, then yeah, it's probably going to be a longer video. So anyway, and if it bothers you, I'm sorry, it will eventually end. But I do things when I can do them. My husband will be getting home from work in a little over an hour, so I need to do this now. Anyway, as excavators continued to uncover human remains, they noticed that the skeletons were surrounded by voids in the compacted ash. By carefully pouring plaster of Paris into the spaces, the final poses, clothing, and faces of the last residents of Pompeii came to life. So that's how they did it. And they did it from the very beginning. They just poured it into a hollow and made these casts. And, my issue is just why? Why would you make people, lots of people think, and it wasn't just me. I've spoken to a lot of people who were like, what? No, that's the bodies covered with ash. Well, no, it's not. That it's just plaster casts. Then another friend of mine, she suggested that I go onto Google Earth to actually look at Pompeii, because she said that she has heard there's actually much more to Pompeii than what is shown on, the little tours that you can take. And so what you see here, what you're looking down on from Google Earth, is Pompeii. And it is uninhabited because they have made it that way. No one can live there anymore. It's a historical site now. And if you just look, this is a vast area. And I find it interesting that only a portion of it can be shown to the public. Because as you can see, it just goes on, and why these tours are only, confined to certain. If I were to spend the money to go to Pompeii, I would want to get my money's worth, and I would want to see all of it. And so what I was doing was I was just looking through here. I wanted to see if I could go down and try to see the mosaics on the floor. And so the interesting thing that I discovered was that when you zoom in, it's just all painted over CGI. You can't really even get a good look at anything. So I wouldn't even be able, and even if I were able to see some mosaics, it probably wouldn't actually be the mosaics that were painted by the people of Pompeii. It probably would be some CGI artists' contrivances. And then I thought, okay, well, I want to do street level then. So you can go down the street level. But another thing that I discovered, and it looks much better. Obviously, it goes from CGI to reality. So that's good. But then what I discovered was you can't even go to street level at a whole lot of places on here. Even street level, it's really only the places where you can take the tours. It's not through all of Pompeii. So just find that a little curious that you can't look down on Pompeii without seeing lots of painted over stuff. And you can only go to street level on, where the tours would be. Okay, so what you are looking at here is the ruins of what is called Irwin Castle. And this is in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. I actually live very close to this. I have never been able to see it, just simply because the town that it's in, Jim Thorpe, the parking is awful. I mean, it's just terrible. I took my kids on a train ride there 2 summers ago, and yeah, the whole parking thing just really makes me not want to go. Although I think that I'm going to talk my husband into going. But anyway, so the reason that I chose the ruins of Irwin Castle for this, well, there's actually several reasons. But first of all, you don't typically find castles in the United States, so that's one thing. And some other things that I found curious about it is that it was said to have been built in 1893. Now, for those of you who have seen my other videos, you know that 1890 especially, and anything like in that time frame, I'd say between like 1880, 1885 up until like early 1900s. But the 1890s really seem to be like key years for lots of historical things to happen. So when I saw 1893, I thought, but of course, because I actually looked up, again, I don't live far from here, but I looked up the dates of many of the houses in my own neighborhood just out of curiosity to see when they were built, and they were all built. My house was built in 1890, and most of the houses, well, actually all the houses that I looked at here were built either in 1890 or around 1890. So let's just read an article. And I also have to point out, does that look like something that was built in 1890 to you? In my opinion, that is much, much older than what we're given the impression of. But here, let's just read a little bit of this article here about it. Every child probably has fantasized about one day living in a big, beautiful castle on a hill. In 1925, Henry Showalter got the chance to live that childhood dream when the sixth grader's family moved into a real castle in Jim Thorpe, then Mauch Chunk. That's what it used to be called. Was he thrilled about the move? No, I wasn't. No more than if we moved into this garage. So let's just skim down. All right. The house was constructed by the late Dr. Bertine S. Irwin, who purchased the property from the Lehigh Navigation and Coal Company in 1893. So, yeah. Every time that I see 1893, I just kind of chuckle, or 1890, or I discovered that. I think it's the soda Dr. Pepper, they say was also invented in 1893. And I think the Maxwell House coffee, 1892. So it's a year that just they keep showing up and showing up. And after people watch that video, they'll look up the history of their towns and they'll comment later and they'll be like, you will never guess what year my town was founded. And I'm always like, was it around 1890? And they're like, yes. So yeah, something strange going on there, but we won't talk about that. I made another video about that. It's called the 1890 Enigma. So if you want to watch that, I think it's my most popular video actually. But let's just continue on. So yeah, so he bought the land in 1893. So it doesn't mean maybe it wasn't constructed exactly in 1893, but thereabouts, shortly after that, or possibly even in that year. As local folklore has it, Doc Irwin often traveled to Europe with wealthy Mauch Chunkers as their personal physician. On one of these trips, Doc was so impressed by a castle he saw on the Rhine that he decided to build a similar one in Mauch Chunk. And then it says, Showalter said Doc used local stone and labor in constructing his castle on the hill. There wasn't a lot of money around, so if you had a day off, you'd work on the house, Showalter said. Instead of paying Doc $1 for the call, Doc would ask you, how about putting time in on the building? So my question is, it's not that big. And again, these are just the ruins. I don't even know how big it was. Actually, it was 21 rooms. So it did say that in the article. But I'm just thinking, how many, would they have used stonemasons for this? And how many of them would they have had? Jim Thorpe is a very small town. There's, even now in 2023, there's only a little over 4,000 people living there. So just the idea that he's like, oh, hey, if you, instead of giving me money to be your doctor, just come work on my castle. And it seems outlandish to me, because how many people would actually have been, skilled enough to do that? It reminds me of the stories of the lunatic asylums, and I talked about this in my castles. Was it? I forget. It was about the lunatic asylums and the castles. You can look in my Question the Narrative playlist. But some of the lunatic asylums claim that they had the patients help build them. And I'm like, wow, because they also looked a bit like castles. And it's like, where are these people getting this fantastic craftsmanship from to just be able to do that? So yeah, so that's the next thing. I think we're just, some of the things that we have right in our own backyard, we need to look into them a little bit further. And actually, I was going to talk about this one later, but since I brought up the whole 1893 thing, this is another thing that I wanted to talk about today. Also mentioned it in my 1890 video, but I thought that it went well here too. Is that, so I'm telling you that all of these really strange things happened, I'll just say in the United States, because I didn't really look into the history of other countries at this point. So if you live somewhere else, I encourage you to look and see if there's kind of like a key year for where you live. But for me, I know that something happened in 1890. And the funny part about it is that in 1890, there was a census fire, and all the census records were burned in 1890. And then in 1897, Ellis Island had a fire and lost all of its records. And let's see how many of the records on Ellis Island were burned in 1897. None of the records held at Ellis Island up to the date of the fire survived. So, what was lost? It would have been between 1855 and 1890. All, oh, there it is again, 1890. But anyway, those are gone. And I'm just trying to see. In April of 1890. Okay, so yeah, so there's that key year again, 1890. And yeah, they lost all the records in that fire. So I can't help it. I just keep thinking, what are these people hiding that, about those years? And all of a sudden, these 1890 records just wiped out in a fire. 1897 records at Ellis Island, like all of them up until that point from Ellis Island, wiped out in a fire. And I believe that it was at Ellis Island where if you look into it even further, it tells you that they were like in fireproof boxes. So could be wrong about that. But yeah, check that video out if this stuff really interests you a lot. So the next thing that I'm going to share with you was actually shared with me in a comment. I believe it was on the troll video, and I really need to start taking screenshots of comments so that I at least have the person's name to properly thank them for telling me about things that I didn't know. So if you are the one who left the comment about these egg-shaped rocks coming out of this cliff every 30 years, just like kind of wave in the comments and say, hey, that was me. So anyway, yeah, there is a cliff in China that, quote, lays egg-shaped stones every 30 years, and scientists have no idea what they are. And it says a mysterious small cliff that lays egg-shaped stones every 30 years in China has left scientists baffled until now. Locals have watched in amazement as these perfectly smooth eggs incubate in hollow overhangs on the cliff and eventually fall to the ground. I mean, okay, do you know what they look like to me, honestly? To me, they look like dragon eggs, like what you would picture a dragon egg to look like. And this actually reminds me of a story that I'm going to share with you, not related to this, but I think that some of you might find it interesting, is that several years ago, when we were still living in the city, my two oldest daughters were going for a walk, and they both insist that they saw a dragon flying in the sky. And they were about 17 and 15 at the time, and especially my 17-year-old, also my 15-year-old, but my 17-year-old, very matter of fact. She is not one to exaggerate, embellish, nothing. She just tells it like it is, nothing more, nothing less. And she insists that it looked like a dragon. And I even tried to show them pictures of like herons, because there are herons around there. And I said, well, if they have their feet back, it kind of looks like a skinny tail behind them. And they were both like, no, Mom, that is not what we saw. So interestingly, I'm not saying these are dragon eggs, because people actually take them home and no baby dragon ever popped out of it. So yeah, unfortunately. But anyway, now geologists may have just solved the mystery at Chandiya, which translates as the egg-producing cliff in Mandarin. And says they found that while tests showed the rock formed 500 million, blah, 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 years ago. During the Cambrian period, the specific section of cliff, part of Mount Gandang, is made of calcareous rock, which is common in many regions on Earth. Experts say the difference in time it takes for each type of rock to erode has led to the appearance of the eggs, which comprise heavy sediment deposits. But it still doesn't explain why the rocks are smooth and round. Let me see if I can find some other pictures. Yeah, so these, this is another, it's a very similar picture, but it shows you these rocks that are, quote, incubating on this cliff. And then they say that as erosion occurs, then every 30 years, these eggs fall to the ground. Hence the cliff, quote, lays eggs. So I actually went over to, let me see if I can find it. Everyone is always recommending Mud Fossil University to me. And I have to tell you that I have subscribed to Mud Fossil University for years. I really have. I don't always agree with him on everything, but I think that a lot of his work is really, really good. So I decided to check this out. and he was showing some other smooth rocks like the ones that are in this wall, and he was talking about how he believes that they are what's called mucosa, and it prevents the body from getting sick. So let me just show you. And so I don't really think that's what this is. Hold on, let me try to show you. So this is a photo of what he believes it is. So as you can see, it's a bit different, and you can definitely tell this does look like the diagram that he was showing. And I don't know if it will show. Yeah, and as you can see, I did leave him a comment. So if any of you go to his channel, tell him to look at my comment. And I asked him if he has an explanation of the cliff in China, because I would love to hear what he thinks about that. Because again, even though I don't 100% agree with him on everything, he's brilliant. So I would really like to know what he thinks about that. So next we have the Rockwall in Rockwall, Texas. And I actually watched an episode of America Unearthed about this with Scott Wolter, and that's another show that I enjoy watching, although I think that he has to either censor himself, or maybe he just doesn't mind censoring himself. Maybe he's part of the cover-up. I don't know. But he found this to be a natural formation, and I know that there are a lot of people who do not agree with him. So here are some photos of this rock wall, and then we will read a little bit about it. If, like us, you simply went about your life referring to Rockwall, Texas, and never really contemplated why it was called that, you're in luck. We've got the answer. The city of Rockwall has, sitting beneath it, a row of hard mineral stones, which appear to be stacked long and narrow, forming what gives the impression of a rock wall. Sparking debate for over 160 years, the formation astounds the imagination and has engaged scientific experts on how and by whom this rock wall of Rockwall was built. Now, I have to say that in the episode that I watched, the townspeople, they firmly believe that it was built by giants. So that's interesting to note. The question in the back of most people's minds has been whether the wall was built by prehistoric man or whether it was a naturally occurring phenomenon. The formation has been well documented in at least 11 different locations surrounding and below the city of Rockwall. Yes, it's a huge wall. It's not just a little area. Beginning in 1852, various excavations have taken place, which are mapped and archived by the Historical Foundation. And let's see. These portions of the wall began to look like dots or dashes and markings that may have formed a pattern, or they could simply have been an actual expanse of a wall, not meaning anything. But to this day, the entire length of the wall remains to be excavated. So they haven't even excavated the entire thing yet. In large part, the wall has been stumbled upon by accident. When someone was digging a well or plowing a field, a portion would become exposed. Some have actually gone looking for it, having purposely excavated it to study. Dr. Robert T. Hill had concluded as far back as 1901 that the wall was in fact no more than a naturally formed sandstone dike. Tests that have been run on the rock since have tried to establish dating and makeup, and have also concluded the very same. Geologists from the University of Texas at Dallas have studied the formation and agree with these findings, which according to the Colorado Geological Survey confirm that the formations came about from the deposit of sedimentary material, which over millions of years, and we're going back into the whole millions and billions of years things, dried and hardened. And I have to say that if you know anything about carbon dating, you know that if anything is exposed to extreme heat, for example, like a volcanic eruption, that will add millions of years to something. So you've got to take these years with a grain of salt. And then there's the question of claims of there being steps and archways. Old newspaper reports and local accounts go as far as describing a corridor, and archived photos appear to show the form of a drawing or writing on one of the rocks. And on one of the excavations, a round metal disc was discovered composed of iron and embedded in one of the stones. It staggers the imagination. But geologist John Geisman says otherwise. And he said, in my opinion, it is virtually impossible for these to have been formed above the Earth's surface. And I think that any geoscientist would say the same thing unless they were interested in nothing more than a lot of fake publicity. So now one thing that I have to say is that when you see these stories in these older newspapers, that was pre-Mockingbird media. So you are more likely to get the truth from older newspaper accounts than you will today. I just have to add that. So Scott Walter did go in to say that he also believes that this was a natural formation, but that's, something for you to decide for yourself. The next one that I'm going to share is America's Stonehenge, because yes, there is a Stonehenge in America. It's in New Hampshire. And, that's one thing is that Americans, when it comes to history, like we kind of get the short end of the stick because everyone assumes that, oh, there's nothing interesting because it's not as old as, say, old world Europe or Africa or the Middle East. It's considered the new world, but it's not. There are so many things that have been discovered here that do not coincide with the accepted history timeline. And this is one of them. So it says, once known as the roadside attraction Mystery Hill, America's Stonehenge in Salem, New Hampshire includes mysterious rock formations, a warren of man-made caves and chambers and stone walls that stretch across the hilltop. The origin and purpose of the structures have been hotly debated among scholars and amateur sleuths for years, raising far more questions than answers. I have to say that I also did see this on America Unearthed as well. Okay, and here's just some photos. Could this winding maze of stone structures have been built by an ancient culture for ceremonial purposes? There's no doubt that a native civilization made use of this area, as fragments of bowls and stone tools have been uncovered during archaeological excavations. Evidence of large fire pits, possibly used in the manufacture of pottery, have also been uncovered, and carbon dating suggests parts of the site may have been constructed 4,000 years ago. So again, we just always take any dates that you hear with a grain of salt. Or perhaps pre-Columbian migratory Europeans constructed this place for religious rituals and ceremonies. The Celts, Norsemen, Mediterraneans, and other European populations have all been considered as builders of this stone oddity. While no hard evidence has been found to support this assumption, it does spark one's imagination. I think the sheer fact that it looks so similar to the Stonehenge in England should kind of be a red flag that, yeah, a very similar group of people erected this. And then there's the sacrificial table, one of the most curious relics at America's Stonehenge. This slab of granite, weighing over 4 tons, has a groove scored into its perimeter to collect liquid and drain it off the side. Did an ancient people perform sacrificial rites here, or was this simply a colonial device used to press fruit or make lye soap? Just below the slab, a speaking tube, a narrow channel carved through stone, links to a cramped chamber. Could someone have once crouched there and used the tube to project his voice out from beneath the sacrificial table in a deity-like fashion? Wow, kind of reminds me of the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. And what about the giant astronomical calendar made of standing monoliths? The stones appear to align with solar and lunar occurrences that could relate to either farming or ceremonial events. Some scholars have said the alignment is a coincidence, while others claim it truly is a calendar. Just going to show you some more photos. We won't read through all the articles that I show you today because we will be here all night. But I just want to get your creative juices flowing, just get that brain going and help you to realize there are so many really neat things out there to look into. So this next idea was also shared with me from someone else. I don't believe it was in the comment section, although it could have been, but definitely someone shared this idea with me, and I had heard it before, but I hadn't thought about it recently, and I thought it would be, good to kind of put this into this video in case any of you have never pondered this. But it's regarding the location of the Garden of Eden and the fact that it might not be where people typically think. So in Genesis 2, it tells us, a river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and there it divided and became 4 rivers. The name of the first is the Pishon. It is the one that flowed around the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good. Bdellium and onyx stone are there. The name of the second river is the Gihon. It is the one that flowed around the whole land of Cush. And the name of the third river is the Tigris, which flows east of Assyria. And the fourth river is the Euphrates. And of course, so we have always placed this to be somewhere, in the Middle East or like northeastern version of Africa. And especially with all of these familiar sounding names, Assyria, Tigris, Euphrates, and I believe was Cush, is Cush the one that is known as Ethiopia now? I'm fairly certain that it is. But I want you to think about this here. A river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and there it divided and became 4 rivers. And then I want you to look at this. 4 rivers. Now, do you know what this map is? This is a map of the North Pole from the 17th century. I believe it was 1606. I actually have this map on my living room wall because I think it's just, I like fanciful things like this. And so, and this isn't just a theory that is new. A lot of cultures actually do believe that something akin to the Garden of Eden was at the North Pole. So, and a lot of people use this as the 4 rivers. Now, the next interesting thing about that is what you see in the middle here. It looks like, see if I can get any closer than that. I don't think I can. It's a magnetic rock right here. Some believe that it is a mountain. Some called it Mount Meru. But what I have read, when I've read about the Garden of Eden, is that we need to remember that the Garden of Eden was just the garden. Eden was, it was more than just the garden. There was the land of Eden, and then there was the Garden of Eden, which was in Eden, obviously. The Garden of Eden was said to be on a mountain. So it's interesting that right here in the middle of these 4 rivers at the North Pole is a mountain. Now, I also have to say that this kind of ties in with a book that I just read. I read it to myself, and then I read it to my children. We just finished this read aloud last week. It's called The Smoky God, A Voyage to the Inner World. And it's put forth as a fiction, but it is written as, it's one of those fiction that it's written like it's supposed to be a true story, but they tell you that it's fiction. But then as you're reading it and you see all these footnotes and all of this historical documentation in there, you're like, okay, yeah, are they just saying that it's fiction so that, people don't think they're crazy or what? And in this book, they actually sail to the North Pole, and the land there is like very temperate. And there are the 4 rivers there, and then they actually go down inside. It's a Hollow Earth book. So, but they go down inside the earth there, and that actually on the interior part is where the Garden of Eden is in this book, but it's still up at the North Pole. So I found it interesting that coincides with it. And that's not the only thing. There are many other cultures who believe that. And then if you even think about the names like Assyria, Tigris, Euphrates, Cush. I live in Pennsylvania, and in Pennsylvania, we have towns right near me that are named like Nazareth, Bethlehem, Egypt. It doesn't mean that these are the places that are over in the Middle East or in Africa. It just means that they are named after them. So, one way or the other, if the Tigris and Euphrates were named after something, could it have been something, these rivers? I don't know. This isn't something that I have looked into very deeply, but I just thought it was interesting enough to include in this today. Next thing is Waffle Rock. I did talk about this in one of my other videos. I don't remember which one it was though, but I thought that it was worth mentioning here again because it is really cool. So this is Waffle Rock. Let me see if I can click on it. There we go. And this was uncovered. Let me go back and, all right, let's read what it says. The Waffle Rock boulder is a strange but not unique example of what is thought to be a naturally occurring pattern that makes this particular boulder look like a waffle. Like many of the ancient artifacts we cover here, the Waffle Rock boulder's origin and creation has been the subject of many theories over the years, including aliens, giant reptiles, and even ancient Indian carvings. Now standing as an attraction for the public to view in person, the Waffle Rock boulder of West Virginia continues to draw the crowds to this truly ancient artifact. And we plan to provide the necessary information on this artifact for you to make your own decision as to its origin and strange patterning. And that's the attitude that I have on my channel. I am not telling you anything that is 100% true. What I am telling you is that it's okay to ask questions and that there is no topic that is off limits. And, and it is up to you to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Don't ever take my word for it on anything that I say here. That is really important because I'm human and I can definitely make mistakes and I can definitely be wrong about things. So if I spark your interest on anything, just say, okay, well, that's what she said, so that's what I believe. No, look into it yourself and then draw your own conclusions. Anyway, the Waffle Rock has an almost honeycomb appearance. The patterns are very geometrical in shape, but are not exact, even though some of the lines are almost perfectly straight. The lines themselves cross at various degrees, forming shapes from triangles to rhombuses, of course making the Waffle Rock look like, well, a waffle. And so this is a colorized or a colored picture of Waffle Rock. All right, so we'll just jump down to the theories on Waffle Rock. So we'll read the alternative theories first. Some theories have speculated that the Waffle Rock was created by otherworldly life forms on a visit to Earth from far-flung planets, and even cite radiation burns on the rock itself as a sign of the landing of an alien spacecraft. Others have also suggested that the rock was actually created by man, especially ancient Indians who carved the rock as a form of art or expression. Another very interesting theory is that the rock is actually an impression of an ancient giant lizard that may have lived in the region in prehistoric times. So, let me see. And I have had the thought of, just like high precision laser tools, making something like that possibly. So the scientific and geological theories are: the common theory is that the Waffle Rock, which is primarily composed from soft sandstone, fractured and cracked during the formation of the mountains in Mineral County, and these cracks were then naturally filled with quartz. The quartz eventually hardened and formed in the cracks, forming the pattern we see today, when the softer sandstone rock was eroded quicker than the much harder quartz rock. This next one is actually the one that I find the most interesting. The other theory, which is truly intriguing, is the idea that electromagnetic fields helped form the geometric patterns of the Waffle Rock. Similar to how snowflakes are formed, the geometric patterns of the Waffle Rock could potentially have been affected by an electrical storm at the moment of its creation. And that is not unheard of, because if you've heard of crop circles, you may have heard the scientific explanation that it was that they may have been formed by an electromagnetic field, and that nature works in mysterious ways and could possibly form geometrical patterns. I can't say that I believe that. I just think that theory is interesting because it coincides with this one, but I don't know although, snowflakes do form that way. Well, at least that's what we're told. It's the problem. You just don't know what to believe about anything anymore. Okay, so this next one, I have actually been wanting to share this on my channel for quite a while, and I was never able to find a way to work it into anything, and I didn't know enough about it to, make a whole video about it. This is the mystery of the Crooked Forest. Yeah, there's a crooked forest. Sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? It's in Poland. The Crooked Forest is a grove of 400 oddly shaped pine trees located near the town of Grafino, West Pomerania in Poland. The pine trees were planted around 1930 when its location was still within the German province of Pomerania. From the base, the pine trees grow with a 90-degree sharp bend northward, but then curve back to grow straight up into the sky. Despite the unnatural curves bending 3 to 9 feet sideways at their bases, these trees are generally healthy and grow up to 50 feet tall. I mean, look at that. Let me see if I can. There you go. I mean, imagine walking into a forest that looked like that. There are many theories on the mystery, although there is little to no evidence to support any of them. Some hypothesize that a unique gravitational pull in this particular area caused the trees to grow curved northwards. But this theory does not hold up to basic scientific scrutiny, given that gravity pulls things downward and not at a curve, or as I would say, density. Others guess that the heavy snowfall in the area weighted down the trees as they were sprouting, causing them to grow crookedly at the base, but this theory does not explain why other groups of pine trees and assorted vegetation in the same area were not affected. Some suspect that the trees were grown for the rims of wooden cartwheels, as the grain direction would have produced very tough wheels. The most widespread and most likely explanation is that local farmers planted and manipulated the trees when they planted them in 1930. But it is estimated that the trees were 7 to 10 years old when they experienced the force that resulted in trunk curvature. And I just can't help but think to myself, why? Why would these farmers take the time to do that? What could they possibly get out of that? So they say that's the most likely explanation, but even that in itself does not make any sense. Were the trees intentionally altered by local farmers? Did the trees naturally bend northwards? Many people have been trying to find an answer to this mystery, but since the town of Grafino was largely abandoned between the early stages of World War II until the 1970s, the people who were there before the war and probably had the answer to the mystery of the Crooked Forest are now likely gone forever. And we'll just take one more look at the Crooked Forest. I have absolutely no explanation for this at all. No idea. I just think that it's just really intriguing. So the last thing that I'm going to share with you today was actually brought to my attention again by a friend of mine. I had seen a video by John Levi on the Ritz-Carlton in Half Moon Bay, California. But it was like a couple of years ago that I saw that, and I just totally forgot about it. But she actually brought this up and reminded me, and I thought this would be a great addition. So this has been exposed from some erosion that happened at the end of a cliff on the property of the Ritz-Carlton in Half Moon Bay, California. And it caused an uproar because people are looking at this and they're saying, is this ancient ruins? Are those columns? What is this that we're looking at? And I have to say that I found this really interesting when I saw it on his channel, because something that looks like this, except on a smaller scale, was actually in the city that I used to live in. There was one that I always used to drive past, and I always wondered what it was. But then it's not there anymore. It was taken down. And I actually tried Googling it to see if there was anything about it, but absolutely nothing came up. So I thought, what is this? And so some people have really made some interesting comments. So this here is on stolenhistory.net. And let's see. I cannot find where it is, but someone just made the comment that if this is sticking out of this cliff, imagine what is underneath that cliff. What else is in there? And so, I was talking about how the United States often gets kind of pushed to the side when it comes to ancient history. And I think that there is definite evidence that we do have lots of ancient history here. Is this one of those things? I don't know, because I actually came across this. Council addresses erosion at Ritz-Carlton, and there's another picture of that. And it says, a round of late February storms took out a section of bluff top by the Ritz-Carlton Half Moon Bay, further exposing and collapsing some older pilings that resemble ancient ruins. The toppled pilings and rebar represent work that had been done on a hotel that was later abandoned for the current structure, which is set further back. So I actually showed these pictures to someone that I know who works in construction and said, what do you think? And he said that in order for something to be this hardened, that it would have had to have been there for a very long time. And so I couldn't really find a year for when this structure was first built, when they would have put that there. So I did actually Google the new Ritz-Carlton, the one that is actually there now, and that one was built in 1998. So it started being built in 1998. So it couldn't have been much before 1998 that this would have been there. So obviously it has not been there for a very long amount of time. So, it's up to you to decide what you think it is. Or if you know, even if you live in the area, go check it out and see what you can find yourself. But anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.